You don't want to miss today's podcast, part 2, with my special friend, Frank Seamster, as we talk about what's the number one ingredient to give you success. You were made for more than the status quo. I'm Pastor Steve Gray, and this is the More Faith, More Life podcast. This podcast is for Christians with an ambitious heart who want to be more for their family, do more with their career, and see more of God's promises in their life. I've spent many years as a worship artist, minister, nonprofit leader, bold truth speaker, and most importantly, father and spouse. When I was in my early 40s, I was craving more from God and more from life. I'd done everything I was supposed to do. My life was good, but it wasn't good enough. So I spent the following years diving into the Word of God and searching for the biblical principles that would bring me closer to God and help my purpose and life flourish. That's what I want to share with you. In every episode, you'll get practical tools based on real-life experiences that you can put into action to redefine your faith and ultimately your life. So, if you're ready to do more, subscribe to More Faith, More Life, and hear an unfiltered biblical truth every week. It's time to be and experience more. Have you gotten my book, My Absurd Religion, By Which I Make My Living? You need to get it. It's going to help you understand a whole lot of things about the world and what's happening today, especially in the church world. Go to the website, More Faith, More Life, and download the ebook with the study guide. Hello, everyone, and welcome to More Faith, More Life. I have my guest, Frank Seamster, with me again. This is our second podcast together. The last one you want to get because we backed up to some of the things in his life that God did with him, for him, to him, through him, to get him into the place where he wanted to go in the ministry. And that doesn't mean he wanted to his whole life. I never even thought about it in mine much. I never thought about going in the ministry other than... Frank, when I was 6, is the first time I said I've been called to preach at 6 years old, but I never said it again. I was at the altar in a Nazarene church, and I said, I've been called, I was crying my eyes out, I've been called to preach. But then I never mentioned it, and nobody else did either. I think maybe if I had somebody nurture me, I could have got more training and stuff. So then I'm gone through all kinds of worldly stuff and played in bars and all that kind of stuff. But when I'm 23... then I get touched by God again. I give my life to Jesus. And without even thinking, out of my mouth came the words, I've been called to preach. And then I went, that's the first time I've said it since I was 6 years old.
The seed was planted.
Yeah. And so you never know. People listening right now, we talk about More Faith. He's our guest and I'm talking. But you got a seed in you. Oh, I don't know anybody that isn't called by God. Everybody's being called right now. God's calling your name, every single one of you. Maybe different things, different timing, different talents. But I've had young guys come up and gals and say, pray for me. I got a calling on my life. And I disappoint them by saying, who doesn't?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that's not getting called by God.
Right.
So anyway, we want to help you get your life on track. We want to help you decide that serving God is the right decision. You may have seen religious people that disappointed you, or you don't want to be weird, or you want to lose fun. It's the right decision to keep you safe, keep your relationship safe. If you're going to have children, it keeps them safe. It's just the right way to go. You don't want to go through life without a connection to God, whether on any level, health, finances, relationships, all those things. And so we're here to encourage you just in the decisions that we made. You don't have to make the exact same decisions, but make a decision to serve the Lord and get involved with the kingdom of God. So anyway, we talked a little bit last time about your background in the military. You were smart. He's in the military, the Vietnam War's going on, and God puts him in a singing group. Really rough, huh?
Really
but
rough.
I can't say anything because I was what's the letter? What's the 1A? 1A.
1A.
I was 1A, ready to be drafted at the war too.
Yeah.
And back then they had the lottery. If I don't know if you did, but they'd draw a number, and every county had to fill that number. If our county, I didn't know at the time, but my number was like 112, I think. Oh. And so I thought 112. My birthday was pulled 112th. So 112. Okay, so they got to get 112 guys and get to me. But I said, that's not that many, though, is it? 100. And So I was painting a room with my brother, my mother's living room. And my brother didn't like to paint. And I remember he's not painting much, and I'm saying, get to painting. But then you could tune in the radio, and they'd read number 1, and they'd read off somebody's birthday, number 2, and they're going to go through 365 because that's how many days. And finally, they called mine at 112 is my birthday in May. Okay, maybe I'm all right, maybe not, but I'm 1A. I'm going. I'm going right to war, you know. Well, I had one thing too. You may have gone to singing quartet, but I cheated a little bit too. I was in reserve officers training too to help put me through college. But I did the same thing. I joined the band.
Oh, right.
So, all I did was march. But anyway, the miracle of it was then we went through, and then suddenly I got a letter. I'm backwards. I was 113. That's what it was. And I got a letter that said we fulfilled Pettis County's quota at 112.
Wow.
And that's all. So now they put me into one F3 or whatever. I don't know what. I can't remember anymore. So I went to another level, but I only played in the band in the ROTC anyway. But I didn't get drafted. But anyway, we talked about that and how that route. Your dad is a pastor,
right?
You got to know that got in there, and we laughed a little bit. That doesn't necessarily mean you want to be one, because you see a different side of the church in life, and the quartet, and then God meeting you. When you were in business.
Right.
And that was it for you, and then the journey begins. And so there could be people listening right now, that's the way it is. But we have other people, they're never going to go in the full-time ministry. You did, I did. We love people that do, but we love people that serve God and can somehow incorporate God into their job, family, children. They get up every day and go to work, all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to start on that level this time in our second podcast together of you went into the full-time ministry because you had this desire for God.
Right.
But even if you hadn't have done that in the ministry, you still had a desire for God.
Still had a desire.
And how do you think that affected the decisions outside of ministry? A dad, a marriage. You got to be a dad. You still got to be married. You got to be a husband, and while doing the ministry. So let's talk about that side a little bit. What do you advice or ideas financially, home, business?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how God will take. It's the same way with I've been blessed with a wonderful wife, like you have been blessed with a wonderful wife, Kathy. And you have these kids and all these grandkids now, and it's a different role but it's still ministry.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, good point. That's a very good point. It's all ministry.
Everything is all about ministry. It is still ministry.
Whether you're in the pulpit or not.
Hey, listen, the greatest ministry is not in the pulpit.
Listen to us, guys. We know this.
Paul called it the foolishness of preaching.
Yeah, right.
So the greatest, and I say this from that is not the greatest ministry. A lot of times, where I feel the best at, where I feel I am being most used at, is outside of the pulpit. When I run across someone. Yesterday I was out jogging and walking a little bit, and this guy came by in his pickup, and I knew the guy. I hadn't talked to him before, but I knew he was in the early stages of dementia. And so anyway, he stopped and he rolled his window down, and I said to him, Danny, hey, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. I'm praying for God. And I tell you, I finished, I prayed with him, and it was like, when he pulled off and I started walking, it was like even feeling more better than if I would have preached my best message in the pulpit, because I'm touching him.
Yeah, right.
I'm touching his life. And that really is the greatest ministry of all, is your ministry to your family, whether it's your children, whether it's to your wife. And it's amazing how God will just open that door every day for you in some way, shape, or form to touch somebody. One of the neat little things I found out, even at the grocery store, you're going through the grocery store, going through the line, and someone says, well, hey, how are you doing? Man, what an awesome opportunity it is to minister.
Yeah, right.
If you don't do anything but say, "Oh, I'm doing great because this is the day that the Lord has made,"
right.
and so I just encourage you. Like you don't have to be behind the pulpit, but wherever you're at with your family, you husbands, you wives, you minister to one another. You minister to your children. That be that example that God has called you to be. That is real ministry. I consider that more important than I do in the pulpit.
Yeah, and I do too.
Yeah.
And you've known me for I don't know how many years now, so you've watched us from
1985.
when we started the church, started ministry, got our family going. All my kids, now my grandkids, and all my whole family. And I try to tell people this, and you can testify too. We're going to be with them after we get done with this. We're going to be with my whole family again, go be together with Frank and Naphtali and enjoy time together. But when you see them, not everybody gets to have the closeness. You can tell these kids who are church kids, they're preachers' kids. I've never had to drag them to church, but the love and caught me for a second. Just my eyes got a little watery for a second.
Right.
But the love and loyalty and outreach that they have back towards me is beyond words. And here, I've been preaching to everybody else, but I've always made sure that they, like you said, that they were my ministry, not just to, but first.
Yeah.
And and it's paid off. I plead with people, keep God in the center.
Right.
Let Him minister through you to your family or to wherever, and God will keep your family together, and you'll get to have the blessings for years and years, rather than when you and I were growing up. When you're 18, you leave home.
Right.
You go to school, leave home, forget it. And when we were growing up, our parents didn't know where we were anyway, even as kids.
I know.
You'd leave and never come back until dinner time. It's different now, and our kids need us, and the kids need their grandparents. They need their parents more than ever. It's another world. What do you see about
it
that?
is.
You can say it maybe better than I can.
And I'm listening to you, and I know it to be true because we feel so close to your kids and your grandkids.
Really, I know.
Really. I mean, I'm looking at my adopted son-in-law sitting
right
there,
on the other side
right
of that
on the
camera.
other side over there.
And you got to be a part of putting him together by prophesying God's. And I had my eye on him, but you got your eye on him first. Because I didn't have it, not in character, but just I didn't see it. Yeah. And you saw it first, and that's made all the difference. Now I got two wonderful grandbabies, and to hold on to in a little while because you saw that.
And to me, that's your credentials. Mm. Some folk look at putting their credentials on their wall. Yeah. That's my I've got my I've been ordained. I've got that on, but that's just a piece of paper. These are your credentials.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that is the proof of your ministry.
Yeah.
That's as I said, that's your credentials. When you look at your kids, you look at your grandkids, and regardless of and maybe yours. 'Cause, hey, we've been there. Maybe yours is not running after God like his are running after God right now. But I tell you what, you just keep that faith. You keep that faith, and you keep speaking, and you keep declaring, and you'll be standing in church with them, and all of a sudden their hands will go up, and they'll be worshiping God. They'll be magnifying God. Because if you plant that seed, and that seed ever gets planted, and I can say that from my own experience, from our own son, who you are his godfather.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
he often reminds me of that.
That's good. I'm glad.
He's 33 years old now.
Yeah.
He says, well, his uncle, he's still my godfather, right?
Yeah, I haven't disowned him. But isn't it true then what you're saying too? Okay, so maybe he's not followed in your footsteps in ministry, but now that he's 33 years old, and I know this to be true because we had a little discussion about him on the phone a week or so ago, but I find this to be true in mine also. If you stay with it and you plant those things in them, they get to be 30 years old, and pretty well, even if they're not in the ministry like you are, you're hearing things out of their mouths that you said years ago, and they're evaluating their life based on exactly the same things that we did. They just don't do it. They don't preach in the pulpit, or they don't maybe serve like we do. But it starts coming out of them, right?
It's funny. It's funny. He kept for the last 2 or 3 weeks when we would get together. He said, "Dad," he said, "listen," he said, why don't you let Mama stay home? And I'll go with you this summer. We'll kick off Kansas City, and I'll go with you. And I said, son, I said, wait a minute. Mama preaches. Well, I can preach too.
And there you go. I mean,
there
you and
go.
I know both, though. Some it's a little bit slower,
Yeah.
but we know what's in him. He's got a great heart, and that's what it takes anyway. The great heart. You're not
Great
a great
heart, and he's
preacher.
got a great heart. And
I know he does.
I stood with him in church Sunday without anything, you know. And he's got his during the worship, he's got his hands raised, and he's worshiping God, and
We even talked about him coming here, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Spending a little time with me.
He says, well, his kind of regret is he didn't stay a long time ago.
Yeah, I can find him a job here.
Yeah,
you know. But it's those are the rewarding things, bigger than anything else. You know, you and I know especially you grew up in more religion and churchy and things. I didn't so much. I attended nominal churches more, but you know that I got after I went in the ministry, I had that attitude of when we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing it'll be. And I get it, but it insinuates a little bit. There's not that. It's a reminder, like it's going to be good then. It's not so good now. And I think that some of those songs I think were written during the Depression, and it wasn't so good.
Right.
But you can have a lot of rejoicing now.
Amen.
And I know religion will tell you when we all get to heaven, get to heaven. If you were to die today, will you get to heaven? And I used to tell you probably heard me say it, that they'd come when I wasn't even a Christian, and they'd say, if you were to die today, do you know you'd have a home in heaven? And I tricked them on that, and I'd say, listen, I don't plan on dying today. What if I don't die? What do you got for me?
Yeah.
And nothing, because it was all future.
It's all in the
but
future.
But it's not, is it?
No, it's in the present.
It's in the
You
present.
can bring heaven to earth.
That's the whole thing, yeah. That's the good news anyway. God will come to these. God comes down.
Yes, He will. Yes, He will. You don't have to wait for heaven. You can experience it now because it's Jesus, and you can literally bring heaven down now and have the joy and have the life and have the blessings and have the goodness. I don't need all of that when I get there. I need it now.
You need it now, exactly. And people forget that, and they think religion takes something away, or maybe it does. Maybe it's not Bible based. The Bible, it's so full of life, and if they can just get that, and there are battles that people are going through right now
every day
that seem hopeless. Once in a while, we don't win every battle. And in the ministry, we want everybody to win, everybody to be healthy, everybody to have plenty of money.
Right.
And sometimes it just doesn't work out as hopeful as we want it to be. But I would say, and maybe you would too, I would say most of the time it has. There's been a few circumstances that were just out of control, marriages you just couldn't get, couldn't get them squared away. Right. But you know what? If they follow and open their heart, soften their heart, most of the time it's going to be victory, success in life. I'm not saying success in the corporate world, whatever, but it could be there too. Yeah. Most of the time I've found that most people win, but there's, it is a battle. Jesus said, there's tribulation and troubles.
Much tribulation.
And it's everywhere.
Everywhere.
And actually, let's back up. Let's go there for a second, because I wanted to go there anyway. All right. So sometimes we look at what we see, and we see trouble too. We see people struggling financially or struggling physically. They got a disease. They've got a bad diagnosis. That happens. But what I see, at least, and I think you do, in the way we work with people in the church world, in the gospel world, in the Jesus world, it's nothing compared to what's out in the world and the trouble that they're in as far as relationships, marriage, children. I don't even know where I'd start if I didn't have children that were were close to me.
Right.
Because they are so indoctrinated way, way beyond, I think, our imagination of the way they think.
Right.
What do you see? I mean, what do we tell people when we're talking about life and faith and the greatness of God? But you could get a pessimistic, fearful attitude, and there's reasons maybe.
Yeah,
What's going on, you think?
Yeah. Well, and of course that's the work of the enemy. He constantly, someone said, "Where's the battlefield?" The battlefield is right between the two ears. He's always going to come down that road to get your mind, to put negative thoughts in your mind, to put negative things in your mind. And you have to become, even as a believer, you have to become skillful.
Yeah.
You have to become skillful, knowing how. And I have found he always comes the same way.
Yeah.
He always comes the same way.
He doesn't know, the devil doesn't know any new tricks.
No,
but he sure is good at his old ones.
He's good as his old ones. But you have to recognize that, and you have to become skillful. With your faith. Just talking about faith alive. Make it. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
It's somewhat it's that life of faith, living that life of faith, regardless of what the circumstances are, regardless of what the situation is, or how it looks, what's going on in our world, what's going on in our nation, what's going on in the economy. I'm telling you, without faith, it is impossible to please God.
Right. You know that scripture, I was just thinking about it, that talks about having our senses trained. That's a NIV one. I don't know what the King James, but anyway, having I think it is. Maybe it is the King James version. I can't remember. But anyway, having our senses, which would be eyes, ears, and all that stuff, mouth, what we hear, what we see, senses trained to know and discern the difference between good and evil. It's kind of the end of a scripture, so I'm getting kind of the end of that verse.
Right.
But think of that. If that's what we're trying to do, we're not just trying to be preachers, like we said, and get people to heaven. We're trying to talk to people about getting their senses trained. Because if you can know the difference between good and evil, right and wrong, and what's in the world, you can say yes to that, no to that. That's not good. This is good. And you can keep it clean. You can keep it prosperous. You can keep it healthy. But so many people today, they're so untrained. They listen to everything. They fall for everything. Yeah. They're upset and angry at everybody. They don't even know who to be mad at, you know.
That as you say, the senses are not trained. And there's another great verse, too, that kind of along that same line where it says, exercise thyself unto godliness.
Yeah, actually, that's
godlike.
Right.
Just what someone says, what's godliness? Godlike, just to be like God.
Yeah.
And it says exercise. And actually that word comes from the word gymnasium.
Yeah.
That's where we get the word
go to the
gym from. Go to the gym.
And that gives you the picture right there. Time to go to the spiritual gym.
Time to go
and emotional
and
spiritual.
Yeah. And when I go to the gym, sometimes, especially, if I got something bulky on, I got something heavy on, I'll take that sweatshirt off and just have just a little thin shirt on, and take the sweat. Why? So I don't have my movement restricted, so I can move. And same thing spiritually. Same thing spiritually. We have to make sure that we exercise and that we don't allow anything to restrict our movement when it comes to the things of God.
Yeah. I've been studying over and over, actually, the first chapter of Romans, which is powerful, and it's a little out there for the novice reader to just start and grasp all that. But one of the things that I'm believing is that Paul is writing to the Romans and saying, this is simplicity, simple side. Everybody knows God. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows about God. Right. Everybody knows it's right. Everybody knows. So basically saying we're without excuse. I've been stretching it by saying nobody can now say, I didn't know or I don't know. So I try to tell our church, take out I don't know. Say, well, what, I hear you're having marriage troubles. What do you think the problem is? I don't know. I go, whoa. You do know.
Right.
You do know. And so no matter who's trying to influence them, like, don't serve God, serve yourself, be selfish, you got to have some me time, all those kind of things. Everybody that's telling you that stuff knows God.
Right.
They just don't know God because it says their selfish wickedness, which just they don't care,
Right.
pushes down the truth. I'm paraphrasing. Pushes down the truth that they know. So everybody listening right there,
right
you
now.
know God and you know what's right and you can do this. Just don't listen to those people that have pushed it down so far that they don't even know there is a God anymore, maybe, or whatever. They've just pushed it down. And instead, like cranking that jack in the box, bing, let it spring up, oh well, right?
Yeah. And the bottom line to Romans chapter 1, they didn't glorify God.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of that. They could have, though.
They could have. Oh, yeah, they could have glorified God. But they didn't. They didn't give God praise. They didn't give God thanks.
And they like the created things rather than the creator of things.
Yeah, and fell more in love with those things.
And how easy is that, Frank, to just switch to loving the creator, not saying you can't have things.
Right.
God, the Bible says he knows you need all these things. And this has nothing to do with not having things. It's loving the creator of things.
Loving the creator. That kind of goes back to that story over in the book of Chronicles that had to do when, remember when the Philistines had taken the ark and had stole the ark. And anyway, it finally ended up in the house of Obed-Edom.
Yeah,
you remember that? And all he did, it talks about the 90 days of blessings.
Yeah.
And all he did was open up his house.
Yeah.
That's all he did was just open up his house. And this is interesting. This is something that I didn't realize until just a few weeks ago. And I've preached this thing so many different times.
We're still learning, aren't we?
Yeah, I am still learning. It says Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The Gittite.
Yeah.
Which was from Gath.
Oh,
which was the home of Goliath.
Goliath, yeah, his bunch.
Here's the most religious relic thing of all of Israel in the house of a Gentile.
Yep. And that's like, what? Yeah.
And the blessings of God.
Yeah, which, if they don't understand exactly what we mean, is the Gentiles at that time were all pagans and not accepted. If you were Jewish, okay.
Right.
And here, God bless somebody that's way out there. You
Way-
might, somebody listen, you could be way out there.
Yeah.
Way out there. God will never choose you. I know my family and friends, I had them, they said, God will never choose you. But he did.
That's
and
right.
he did. And so we want that so much for you. To the point where we can sound like salesmen almost, because we just want it for you.
Right.
We want to protect you, want to save your life. We want you to become a lifesaver too for your children and your family. It's the best life you can have, and it's a protected life. It's a prosperous life. So don't listen to all the voices that have shoved down God to where they're saying stuff that are just foolishness about God. We're telling you the truth. That great life, the life of faith and enjoyment. The best life you can have is for you. Last time, Frank, I mentioned, and I'm going to mention it again, that it's just a small book. And by the way, I'm finishing a book, and I want to write another one real quick. I'm so behind in it. But so I want you to get this one before the other ones come out. And My Absurd Religion was a title that maybe you don't realize. It was put in bookstores. I don't know if I ever told you the story. So it was put in all the bookstores that you know. Just name a bookstore, Christian bookstore. And but they put it in there without reading it. And so they said the preachers were coming in saying, what is this book in here? Because it says, My Absurd Religion, by which I make my living. So I'm still doing it, but I'm exposing so much. They said, we don't know what to do. There's a riot. I said, just send them back. I never wanted it in your bookstore anyway. So I took them all back, but I got thrown out of the bookstore, so to speak. So you need to find out what would upset the insiders so much that you need to know. My Absurd Religion. It's an ebook along with a study guide that you can get. Follow the directions that you get on this screen and what you're hearing and what the announcers say. And get this book so you can graduate to another book. You just find out what I've been saying these years about what's going on in religion so you can figure it out. You won't be disappointed. You won't be surprised. And then you can move on to something greater than God has for you. So My Absurd Religion, which we still make our living. We're still at it. Well, so glad you could be here with us for More Faith, More Life. Frank, it's been great having you. We did two podcasts. It was a lot of fun. I hope it's been helpful to the people. Until next time, bye-bye.